Welcome to Excel 2010 Statistics video number 12. Hey, if you want to download this workbook, Business 210, Excel 2010, Chapter 1, click on the link below the video. Hey, in our last video, we talked about the definition of statistics, and we saw that data had a lot to do with it, right? We got to get data, and then we collect the data, analyze, present, interpret it. So we got to talk about how we set up data. Now, in statistics, we're going to have these terms. Here's a small data set, and I've color coded it. Right? Our company name is going to contain a column filled with something called an element. It means for this particular element, Whole Foods, we're going to collect some data. And then we have another one, Kroger. Now, when you have this list here, there can't be any repeats. Whole Foods Markets is listed only one time, and then you collect little bits of raw data on it. So, elements. Now, in Excel and databasing, the word elements is not usually used. Something like primary key. And it means the same thing. There is a unique item listed only one time in the first column. And then for each unique item, we collect bits of data. Here at Highline, your element or primary key would be student ID. Right? So we have a first column here. We have a unique identifier here, and then we list for each student things like first, last, address, city, state, and then on and on. All right, so element or primary key in database in our Excel. Variables. Variables means for each one of these elements, we want to collect certain types of data, right? So this tells us what type of data we're going to collect here. Market stock value, quarterly revenue growth, earnings before income tax, depreciation and amortizations, earning per share, PE ratio. For student, the variable would be first, last, address. It means for this column, that's all we're allowed to have here is address. All we're allowed to have is city. And then we could have Seattle, Burien, or whatever. These in database and in Excel are called fields. They're also called all sorts of other things. Column headers, column labels. We already saw that term used in a pivot table. Now, variables and fields, column labels, or column headers. There's one slight difference. In statistics, the variables are going to be listed only here. The first column is not included. In basically everywhere else, all of these will be considered the fields or the column headers or the row labels. In fact, when we do our pivot tables, that's how we'll think about it. But in statistics, we want to differentiate. These are going to be variables. It means these are the bits of data we're collecting about whatever's in the first column. The elements. Now, observation. This is a particular observation here for this element. This is another observation. Right? In database and in Excel, this is called a record. Right? So, elements, first column, a unique list. That's the items we're collecting data on. Variables, the field names at the top for the remaining columns. It says what's in this column, what's in this column, what's in this column. And then observation, that's one record or row of data for the element. Now, I'm going to scroll. All right, let's look at this list of terms here that they'll directly from our textbook. Data is going to be defined as facts, figures collected, summarized, analyzed, and interpreted. This is different than our raw data. Raw data is the individual piece, right? By itself, or piece of raw data like Seattle doesn't mean very much, but when we group it together and summarize it, it could have some meaning, like how many students are in Seattle. So data here is a little bit broader than raw data. Data set, the data collected in a particular study. It could be here. In just a moment, we'll look at a stock example of some data collected for a particular time period. So data set. Number of elements and number of observations. The data set with n elements contain n observations. Notice elements and observations are equal. They're going to be defined as n. Now let's look at this, right? Here's the elements. Oh yeah, there's only one item listed for each. This is a student ID, which is different from this. Oh, and there's only going to be one row, right? So since an observation, there's only one row of raw data, which is called an observation for each element, then of course the number of elements is equal to the number of observations. That's what that means right there. I'm sure that'll show up on a quiz. Total pieces of data, number of elements times number of variables. So if I were to take 3 times 5, the number of variables times the number of elements gives me how many pieces of raw data there are. Source of data could come from all sorts of different places. Individual companies themselves, we mentioned earlier, collect their own data. Data companies, you could go out and get data. Trade groups, the internet, governments. There's some great lists in the textbooks. Data warehousing, capturing, storing, and maintaining data, right? Imagine Google and Amazon. They have a lot of data, and so data warehousing is the term for capturing, storing, and maintaining that data. Data mining. We talked about data analysis earlier, but that's usually done on smaller data sets. But data mining, creating useful information from large sets of data like Amazon or Google, right? That means you have so much data, you build computer systems that automatically go into the data and calculate patterns or recognize patterns or trends or whatnot. That's called data mining. Now I'd like to look at an example. Remember, we have elements, variables, observations, primary keys, fields, and records. Our data, it does not always come like this. In this textbook, they kind of present this data set to you and say, here's how it's going to be set up. But that's definitely not how data is always set up. Now, if it's, we ultimately do want some sort of list of elements or primary keys, so we're going to have to create it sometimes. Here's a data set. We have date, open, high, low, close, volume, adjusted close, and then the stock. So this is stock price data. And then there are monthly returns, right? And so what we'd really like is to summarize this. Up here, this data is already summarized, right? So we've summarized it in some ways. Here we're going to have to. All I want is a list of Microsoft. See, notice all the repeats because we have lots of individual stock prices for each month, adjusted close, and each monthly return, right? So we have a bunch of them. But what if we'd like to calculate the average, right? The average monthly stock price, the standard deviation or something like that. If we keep scrolling down, oh, there's another big chunk of data, Google. So what I'd like to do is get to something like this. Oh, now that looks like our data set. We have elements, we have some variables, and we have some observations. Right? So I'm going to show you just briefly how here we'll see how to do this in chapter 4, I think it is. All right? So I'm going to click in one cell, and I'm going to create a pivot table. Going forward, I think maybe next chapter I'll show you this a few times more. Insert pivot table, pivot table. If you're going to be doing this all the time, it definitely is worthy to learn the keyboard shortcut. I'm going to click Escape. Now I'm going to teach you an Alt, A-L-T, the Alt keyboard shortcut. So you hit the Alt key. And in Excel, when you hit the Alt key in 2010, you see all these little screen tips or tool tips. If I hit N now, that N is saying, if you hit me, I'll open up the Insert menu. So now I'm going to tap N. And now a bunch of new ones show up. Here is a V. So now if I hit V, it will open up this drop-down, V. And then T for pivot table. So it's Alt NVT. And the way you do, I'm going to hit Escape. The way you do Alt keyboard shortcuts is you tap Alt, and then N, and then V, and then T. right? In succession. You don't hold them down. I'm going to click escape, and I'm going to do it again. Because after a while, I mean, in this class, we're going to create a lot of pivot tables. Just as we talked about last chapter, one cell only and Alt-NVT. Now, if you always want it on a new sheet, notice the default is new sheet, and you've set up your data correctly so it guessed right. That button right there is highlighted in black. That means if you hit enter, it will create the table. So watch this. I'm going to click escape. After a while, you just go Alt-NVT, enter, and there you go. Now I'm going to drop the stock. That's the stock name down to row labels. Boop. There's our elements. Now I'm going to drop monthly returns down to values. Monthly returns. That's not even close to what we want. That's adding them all up, not what we want. I'm going to drag the percentage monthly returns again down to values. We saw how to do this last chapter, chapter 00. Now we have two calculations. I'm going to right click. We can go to value field settings. I'm just going to do it briefly. I'm just going to change the calculation to average. And just like that, we have our average. Now, all of us so far in this class can understand, oh, that's the return. So if we invested $1, when we get 0.026, we earned 2.6 pennies or something like that for the month. Here we earned a half penny. Right? So we can understand monthly return. But now I'm going to right click, show values as, and go to more. I should have just opened up that. And I'm going to go down to standard deviation here. In chapter 4, we'll talk about standard deviation. It's a proxy for the risk. That means the volatility. All we're doing here is just noticing that we had to create our data set from raw data with our element or primary key, our variables, and then our observations or records, in this case calculations. Now I'm going to come down here and double click this sheet 7 and type PT2. Enter. Come over to data set. OK, so there we go. There's an example of data sets, the terms we're going to use. We also related the statistical terms used in this class, in this textbooks, to ones we see in the real world. Let's go look at a few other things, because now we want to go to the sheet called Excel table. We're talking about data here, right? So I got to show you the table feature. And now what I'd like to do is do a couple quick formulas here. We have, again, our raw data, and we need to calculate our elements. And I'm going to do a total. So I want to add up all of Camry's sales. So I need to add that one and that one. For RAV, I need to add this one and this one. For Accord, I need to add this one, and this one. Well, of course, we're not going to do this by hand. Just as we saw how to use the COUNTIF function, luckily there's a SUMIF function. So equals SUMIF. I love the name of this. It says SUMIF. So the if part means there's got to be some criteria or condition. There's our criteria condition. Now, for SUMIF, the range, that has all the criteria. I highlight that. I hit the F4 key to lock it, because we're going to copy the formula down, and that range needs to be locked, comma, the criteria, one cell to my left, comma, the sum range. Be sure to lock this one, F4. Notice these both have to be locked, but not the criteria, because as we copy the formula down, that green box needs to move to the new criteria. Let's see. I think we can leave the closed parentheses off. Control Enter. It's totally polite. It puts it in for us. I'm going to copy this down. All right. Similarly, we can do, let's add some formatting. Something like that. Equals COUNTIF. The range, we're just counting this time. F4, comma, criteria. Control Enter. No format there. All right. Now, one other thing is I want to make a chart. The chart that shows, say, the total. So I'm going to highlight these. Go up to Insert, Column. Delete. I'm going to say, I'll leave it like that. I'm going to point to the edge and click and drag in. I just do want to do a small example here. Maybe make it a little bit higher. All right, and I'm going to get rid of these lines. Maybe do two things. Click on the lines right there. Notice they're all highlighted, so I hit the delete key. I'm going to Control 1. I've selected the columns. Just to make it interesting, I'm going to fill vary colors by point. Do one last thing. I'm going to go to the layout, data labels, outside in, and it will show me the value. Then I'm going to click right here, delete. Click on this. Control 1. Notice we've highlighted a certain chart element, all of them. Control 1 goes to format. I'm going to click on number, currency, and 0. Now, the whole point of this was to talk about something called the Excel table feature. Now, notice what we've done. Right now, it's hard-coded B2 to B8. So I'm going to click the Escape key. I'm going to come down here, and we still have another record to add. So I'm going to add 6-23/2011. We sold another RAV, and it was for $20,950. Notice that none of this updated. And a lot of times when you keep your data in Excel and you're doing your data analysis day in and day out, you want to do your calculations in your charts one time, and as you add new records, have everything update. All right, so that didn't update. I'm going to click here, and actually, I got some lines here and everything, and I want to delete not only the content, because if I use the delete key, notice it leaves the formatting. I'm going to undo that. So if you go up to Home ribbon, and over in the editing group, there's something called the eraser or the clear all, and it clears it all. Now, Excel table, it's just one click away. If we convert this from a regular data set to an official Excel table, it will have dynamic ranges. That means if we add new records to the bottom, everything will update. Now, insert table is how you do it. The keyboard shortcut you can see there is Control T. I'm going to click in one cell. Just as our data analysis last chapter, we learned you click in one cell and Control T. It says, hey, where's your table? It has headers. Click OK. Now, it does a bunch of cool things. It adds some formatting. It adds our drop downs. You can sort and do filtering. But the most amazing thing is that it's dynamic. Notice that little corner thing down there, that little triangle. And let's just double check this before we add a new record. It sure enough does say B2 to B8 and C2 to C8. Now, very importantly, there's no data below our table because it's going to automatically extend. Now, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can actually just come here and start typing. I usually like to click in the last bottom right corner cell and hit the tab, T-A-B, the tab key. And now I do 6-23/2011. I sold a RAV. You can already see immediately that updated there. Let me just Control Z on that. Watch this. Before I hit RAV, look at that. It's 2, and as soon as I hit tab, it turns to 3. And then we sold this for $20,950. And then watch the total there. I'm going to hit Enter. And sure enough, it updated. Now, let's check this out when we put this in edit mode. That is magic. B2 to B9, C2 to C9. Now, in this class, we're going to be given static data sets. We're never adding data. But if we're in a class to learn statistics, go use in our jobs for the rest of our lives, this trick is totally amazing in Excel for real life data sets. Now, oftentimes data sets are kept in huge databases, and then you export it into Excel and do data analysis. But lots of people just flat out keep data in Excel, and Excel table feature, totally awesome. Now, 2 more things. We're going to click on the sheet called cross-sectional, and we want to talk about what a cross-sectional data set is. And the way I think of it is cross-sectional. It's one point in time with many categories. So check this out. Over here it says 6/30/2007. I know that's kind of small. and there's lots of categories. So what this chart is showing us is that on this month, here are all the counties and the number of permits issued. So the key to cross-sectional is one time, many categories. If we come over to time series, one or more categories across time. So, here it says Lucas. I know that's really small there. But Lucas is the county. And then the horizontal axis lists time going forward. And then we can see our line chart showing us the trend over time. So the way you think of time series is one category. It actually can be one or more, and many times. Now I want to show you how to create both of these charts. Let's click on the Let's click on the sheet Time Series 2. Here's our already summarized data set. And here's an example of the two charts we're going to create. This is a time series. Notice time is across the horizontal axis. And then sure enough, we have an element, and we can see how that has changed over time. And no problem, we can list more than one element on a time series chart. Our cross-sectional chart, we see it's one point in time. And then we have our elements listed so we can compare them at one point in time. Let's scroll over. Now our data set is already summarized as if we already created a pivot table. We're going to create the time series first. Highlight the entire data set, not the first row. And we'll go up to the Insert. And we're doing a line. And choose this first one right here. Now remember, a line is one number plotted against a category, right? So our category is year. And we actually last chapter 00, saw an example of when we create a chart like this. If the chart wizard doesn't interpret your data correctly, we saw how to change this. Now there it is, just pretty much with one click. Our legend lists each line and what element, and then across time. So that's a time series listing multiple elements. Now let's do our last chart. Oh yeah, one point in time. So let's pick 2008. And I want to show each one of our stores here. Now, how in the world do I do that? The data is not next to each other. The Control key is the trick. You select the first range, then you hold Control, then you select the second range. Now we can go up, Insert. I'm going to do a column. I'm going to click here and delete. We don't need that. Maybe delete these lines and make sure they're all, and then delete. And we could do some more fancy things. One thing, this chart is not complete until we add a title chart. So layout, chart tools, layout, chart title, above. Click up in the formula bar, 2008 sales, enter. And we could do a bunch more fancy stuff to this, but now we get the idea. If I move these, sometimes it's tricky to move. You have to click it, click on the outside edge, and when you see that cursor, click and move. All right, so the time series means we have one or more elements across multiple times. Across sectional means at one point in time, we look at either multiple categories or multiple elements here. All right. So that's a lot about data. We talked about the terminology for data. We saw how sometimes our data comes already with elements. Other times we have raw data and we have to create somehow a summarization table with our elements. We saw the Excel table, totally awesome. We can add records and everything updates. We saw cross-sectional and time series. In our next video, we'll talk about the ever-important scales of measurement in statistics. All right, see you next video.